With all the recent news surrounding the Walking Dead universe, including Dead City, that Maggie and Negan spinoff set in New York, a European road trip show with Daryl Dixon, Sans Carol after Melissa McBride wanted a much-deserved break, Tales of the Walking Dead, the unfortunate return of Fear the Walking Dead, and somehow its 8th season.
They just plain sucked. I've seen teams suck before, but they were the suckiest bunch of sucks that ever sucked.
And a newly announced, possibly limited series focusing on Rick and Michonne, not to mention the final 8 episodes of the main show itself. I guess you could say we have a lot of stuff coming for 2022, 2023, 2024.
Hot diggity dog! This place is magnificent.
Look, at the time of recording this video, it looks like AMC is planning on a 2023 release for pretty much all of that content outside the finale of The Walking Dead itself, but we don't really have much more to go on besides that. The only one they're filming right now is...
Hey, Maggie.
So... we'll see. Anyway, I thought it was important to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of what's going on here. Because on one hand, the long-running series is ending this fall with the conclusion of its 11th and final season, while on the other, it's gearing up for its biggest expansion yet, with an additional 4 spin-offs running concurrently with the 8th season of its original offshoot. So why, oh why, does it seem like AMC is trying to have its cake and eat it too when it comes to its most popular property? Well, the reason for that is rather multifaceted, with various points I hope to cover later in other videos, but just to give you a quick dirty breakdown, the answer boils down specifically to AMC's viability as a mid-level player in the current streaming wars. The exact same ones that were shaken but not otherwise destroyed a few weeks ago when Netflix announced that it lost nearly 1 million subscribers in the second quarter of 2022, and through the last couple of days, Discovery's handling of pretty much all of HBO's content on HBO Max. Now, going back to Netflix, that's not nearly as many subscribers as they anticipated losing after the first quarter of this year, but it's still a pretty big blow to the once strongest streaming platform in the entire world. With that being said, I wanted to focus specifically on the content that has been confirmed for The Walking Dead's ongoing universe and what it might potentially mean for the immediate future. Okay, let's start with the elephant in the room. Based off the news from San Diego Comic-Con just a couple of weeks ago, it now looks like the Rick Grimes Walking Dead movies are gone, no more, deleted from the face of any planned schedule from AMC, Universal, and everybody else. Instead, it looks like we're getting a series starring the apocalyptic power couple of Andrew Lincoln and Denai Guerrera, reprising their roles as Rick and Michonne, respectively. This is relatively good news, at least if you're a diehard Walking Dead fan like myself. For everybody else, including casual fans or even AMC themselves, I'm not entirely sure. The last several months seem to suggest that there is definitely a big market for established properties to flourish at the box office, specifically theatrical content aimed at nostalgia and big budget non-MCU level content. Additionally, it would seem that a theatrical window is a uniquely beneficial way to grow one specific streaming network, as the additional cultural awareness draws audience to the service that wouldn't otherwise seek it out on their own. Theoretically, the spectacle of a big budget Walking Dead movie might be enough to draw in audiences that either previously gave up on the series as a whole, or were just organically discovering it for themselves. Now, one would imagine that a well-received movie would have led a number of people to wonder exactly how the story led to that specific moment, and they would have sought out other related content on their own. I mean, heck, Gimple pretty much said that for years.
We are going to continue telling Rick Grimes' story in a series of AMC original films.
Original films. Original films.
But I guess AMC's thought process is that type of outcome would have been based on a metric ton of what ifs, with potential profits being split between AMC and Universal, and it would have also meant that the movie would likely end up on Peacock instead of initially on AMC Plus. Look guys, this isn't entirely a proven science, and the benefit of keeping all of their biggest properties firmly under their own control is certainly the stance that AMC seems to be taking with all of this. I just think that this decision would have made a little bit more sense a year, maybe even a year and a half ago, and not where we are right now in 2022, especially with everything that I mentioned previously going on with the streaming wars. Anyway, outside of the Michonne series, we're awaiting the arrival of Maggie and Negan in New York and Daryl in Europe, while Morgan Jones continues to investigate a community that is way too into the safety of children. And a series of seemingly unconnected stories to the overall universe. I think it's pretty fair to say that The Walking Dead is in a bit of a transition period at this moment. But what, oh what, dear audience, could that transition actually be? Well, that's kind of the point of this video, as the entire concept and future of the Walking Dead universe seems to have been built on the back of the end of its own second phase, which ends with the conclusion of the main series this fall.
Wait a minute. First phase. When did that begin? When did it end? When did the second phase begin?
Seriously? Where have you even been this entire video?
I don't know.
Anyway, so I'm imagining I've lost a couple of you with that statement. For one, when did the first phase end? When did the second phase begin? And what did either mean to the overall story of the universe? And what is the third phase potentially going to be moving forward? Well, if you ask me, I'd say the first phase ended on February 14th, 2016 with the mid-season premiere of the 6th season entitled No Way Out. This would mean that the first 5 seasons and 9 episodes of season 6 of The Walking Dead, as well as the first season of Fear the Walking Dead, were all part of the first phase of the overall story, which ultimately focused on the concepts of survival for our main characters. For the audience, we had spent nearly 7 seasons of television focusing on that specific goal, culminating in the massive Walker migration orchestrated by our main characters in the early episodes of season 6. Leading into our group's successful defense against the Dead to save Alexandria, and showing once and for all that the Dead were no longer the main issue for our survivors in the series. From there, the second phase of the Walking Dead universe shifted focus ever so slightly away from mere survival to trying to find normalcy in a hectic world surrounded by the Dead. As our characters across the 2 shows that had premiered up until this point, as well as World Beyond later down the line, focused away from the immediate threat of the zombie hordes outside their walls and on how one lives in an apocalyptic world, not merely surviving in it. Throughout this phase of the universe, we've seen our characters struggle with issues of indentured servitude, opposing ideologies, racial divides, class divisions, and the general complacencies that come from a life of comfort, even in a world such as this one. However, for as good and, let's face it, bad as it has been, this isn't a direction that could or even should continue into the indefinite future. This is likely why Robert Kirkman decided to end the comic book run when he did, as any continued exploration into his world would start to feel like cheaper and cheaper rehashes of the same idea. This is specifically because Kirkman made it clear that his story would never explore the origins of the zombie outbreak, nor would it attempt to drive the story towards a real cure for the virus or a solution to the problems that crippled the world around our main characters. Yet, I don't think AMC has the same resolve when it comes to the expansion of their zombie universe.
There's no magic. There's no cure.
They're liars!
Instead, I think the exploration into a cure or a solution for the zombie outbreak is the real direction for the next phase of The Walking Dead on AMC and AMC+. Ever since the premiere episode of The World Beyond in October 2020, the audience has been given subtle hints that the Civic Republic has been working towards a cure for nearly a decade into the zombie apocalypse. This is in addition to the post-credits scene at the end of The World Beyond that hinted that a handful of French scientists were trapped in the United States and potentially alive and well this far into the future. As you may recall from season 1 of The Walking Walking Dead in a show-only storyline, something not featured in the comic books. We had Dr. Jenner saying that the French were the closest to finding a potential resolution for the zombie outbreak. And just like that, Dr. Jenner was brought back at the ending of The World Beyond in order to solidify that memory with the broader audience and hardcore fandom of The Walking Dead. On top of all that, we're now going into an uncertain future for Fear the Walking Dead's 8th season as our main characters venture blindly towards a waterfaring community that has some subtle but strange visual similarities to the Civic Republic military that is currently working on a cure and could potentially be working with the French scientists mentioned in The World Beyond. And look, it's still potentially possible at the time of recording this video that a lot of this starts coming together during the last 8 episodes of The Walking Dead, or maybe it's hinted out in the backgrounds, and this is something we're going to explore more in the spin-offs. I'm just saying, if you look at everything that's been building over the course of these last couple of seasons, it all seems to be focusing primarily on a cure-all. I know it really seems unlikely, but doesn't it seem just a bit likely that Scott Gimple and company have been slowly weaving together a story that will require all of our main characters to venture into the world unknown, relying on each other to complete their individual missions and come together once again in order to save the world?
In the meantime, they were like, hey, you wanna go on a mission? And I'm like, yeah.
We already know that the creative team behind The Walking Dead wasn't expecting AMC to pull the plug on its biggest show ever, even after the series ran out of comic book source material to adapt. We also know that a majority or potentially all of these stories were planned to be told sometime years ago.
Head out west.
New Mexico.
What the hell's in New Mexico?
Walter. Put your dick away, Walter.
People who it.
If anything, the only thing that has legitimately changed about AMC's plans or the future of The Walking Dead is not the story itself, but the business of television, as the potential for year-round content for popular IP has required a shift in a way that TV shows are made and altered the way stories are being told. As AMC's programming chief Dan McDermott recently said about the upcoming release of their adaptations of Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, you have to develop supporting characters underneath those significant leads that can, and this is a process of discovery. Some of these are in the books, and some of these might be new characters. Some of these might be characters that have small roles in the books, but would be created to have an oversized impact in the series. But ultimately, after 2 or 3 seasons, spin off and become leads of their own series. And then you can really start to have fun, because then you can start pulling characters from different shows. For me, taking McDermott's word to heart here, you can start to see the way AMC has envisioned the future of The Walking Dead as a continuing brand of multiple, multi-season shows starring fan-favorite characters that can easily be folded into each other's series in order to build a bigger story that's being told across multiple series instead of your normal 16 episode seasons for the main show. And if you ask me, I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for the universe as a whole to branch out and do some new and interesting things. Because if nothing else, the utter dedication for the main show to finishing out the source material, as well as the reliance on getting those Rick Grimes movies out for the last several years, even before it became a new television series, was, at least for the most part, pushing the entire universe back. As I said in a previous video,
Flashback.
The very last thing you want to do when walking this tightrope between a movie franchise based around this entire universe that's been playing out on TV for over a decade now is to alienate any fans, new or old, who either gave up on the franchise beforehand or might be new to it altogether before they have a chance to see the series itself. What this really means is, despite having 3 entire series based around this entire universe leading up to the multiple series themselves, you can't introduce characters, specific locations, plot points, or even elements of the story that would alienate any new fan coming into those multiple series. They have to be original experiences for everybody watching them, both old fans and new fans alike. And the only reason that that seems to be problematic is that this entire universe up until this point has made it clear that it's not willing to step forward and make any real substantial change to the characters or dynamics of this apocalypse until it's allowed to introduce whatever element that they're trying to introduce within those TV shows. As somewhat of an example, The Walking Dead World Beyond has started to delve a little bit more into the Civic Republic military's use of all these people that they've been abducting that we originally saw within The Walking Dead in seasons 7, 8, and 9. These are interesting answers that seemingly point in somewhat of an eventual direction for any planned
multiple series crossover event.
But ultimately, this revelation has left us with way more questions than we have answers. And unfortunately, I have to say, as a committed fan of this entire franchise, I kind of take offense to that. For what it's worth, I've stuck with this entire franchise for over a decade now, vehemently defending it when everybody else around me was trying to give up on it and telling me that it was no good. So if anything was going to be more exciting for me as a super fan of this franchise, the expansion of the entire universe was really going to get to me. And yet, despite any of this, it seems like every single decision they've made since this announcement has been in service of the release of these
series.
End of flashback.
This is why I'm somewhat certain that the continuing story that's going to be told over the course of these spin-offs must be centered on the cure or some legitimate fix for the zombie problem as a whole.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Look, everybody, I'm not sure if any of this is what's going to be happening or whether or not it's going to be the real future of The Walking Dead. I mean, we just recently learned that Tales of the Walking Dead is planning an episode several decades into the future, and I'm sure that series, as well as everything else, can be giving us a sense of direction that Gimple and crew are aiming for, or possibly could just be a one-off and we're never going to think about it again. Who knows? But either way, I feel like a story like this can survive outside of dividing some of our biggest characters up between multiple shows and trying to tell a much bigger narrative, because it's that much more engaging. You can't just simply have people survive the whole time or learn to live in The Walking Dead's universe. It will get boring. Robert Kirkman wasn't wrong about that. I feel like he was right to end the show when he did. But that's just my take.
The KRW Network.